Hey guys, just a reminder that if you want to be in with a chance to win the GH60 and GM40 MSI gaming headset and mouse package, you can enter by following the link below. This giveaway ends on Sunday 15th of July 2018, and if you've already entered you can gain extra entries by having watched this video. Now the GK80 keyboard was something I personally requested from MSI because, for one, I wanted to upgrade my keyboard, mainly ticked all the boxes of everything that I was looking for in a keyboard. I've been more than pleased with it, to be honest with you. Initially, I had to get used to the, of course, slightly different angle of key position compared to my previous board, but as with any peripheral change, you're going to get used to that really soon. It's always going to be the case. Once I acclimatized myself to the board, it's just been incredibly natural and rewarding to use. Keyboards are always one of those things where it seems like, to a point, you think it shouldn't be that big deal of a thing, but it's also one of those things where when you've used a good keyboard compared to one that is just okay or passable, you really notice the difference. When you have one that's built properly and designed well, you can just feel the difference. It's actually hard to kind of put your finger on why very specifically. It's one of those things you've just got to kind of feel it out. And I think that goes often with peripherals, for me anyway, to a degree. It often feels almost more instinctive and somewhat unquantifiable, which is why when you're recommending stuff to people, it can be tricky sometimes, because you can say, well, look, I've had a really solid experience with this, but you kind of have to make your own mind up. All I know is I've had 3 boards before this one, all from reputable makers, and whilst they've all been passable and relatively comfortable and functional, the GK80 for me is the one that I am planning to stick with for a good amount of time. It just beats my previous boards on every aspect. The general layout and configuration is really nice. It's got a standard USB port up there on the top right, which is useful if you want to have any extra functionality there. I guess one small negative just on the general layout is above where your number pad is. Of course, you've got your caps lock lights and all that kind of stuff, the number lock lights, and I find that those can be a little dull in terms of, you know, intensity of light sometimes, because the keyboard is very bright. It can be easy just to miss, like if you have number lock on or something like that, which I've actually had in-game in the past, and I was like, why is this being an issue? I thought my keybinds were not working properly, and it was just, yeah, I had one of the locks on and I wasn't aware of it. So that's one thing which is like a small negative, but again, it's not something which is really frequent. It's quite a minor thing. But let's get into the main things. So the switches. The GK80 comes with Cherry MX Red or Silver. My board has the silver switches, which have a light actuation force. They're often referred to as speed switches. Both of these switches, the red and the silver, are linear, but the main difference is the silver's having only a 1.2mm actuation as opposed to the reds having a 2mm actuation. This is giving you theoretically anything like a 30 or 40% faster trigger than red Cherry MX switches. Now again, it's going to be pretty dependent on the game that you are playing, how much of a difference that makes. I play a lot of FPS games, and so when you're making very, very fast inputs in multiple situations, i.e. having to kind of jump around corners, turn on a dime and like engage people, multiple different things, you know, that's the difference between maybe making those inputs and those connections at the right time and not, and it may make the difference for you in terms of whether or not you just grab that kill before you duck behind cover, because it's all just to do with how fast you can get your inputs in. Having a keyboard also with a freestanding palm rest, I highly recommend it. It might seem like something that doesn't jump out as being very significant at all, but having spent a lot of time using this board now, the ability to just constantly adjust your palm rest position on a day-to-day basis, or if you need space on your desk, just remove it completely, it's actually something which is a very helpful, functional aspect to consider. For me now, I wouldn't consider actually using anything else for gaming than a board which has a palm rest specifically designed to go with it. GK80 is also an anti-ghosting board, and not having to worry about that, especially when you're in intense situations, again, needing to know that your multiple inputs that are being put through are accurately connecting. From what you can read about this in terms of ghosting, it's pretty debatable actually how much of an impact there is with issues like rollover and ghosting, but for myself in the past, I can think of at least a couple of times where inputs had felt like they were missed or didn't respond, but it could have equally been something going on in the game. And when you know your own keyboard, you can just tell when something isn't right. So having peace of mind that that's not going to happen is always a good thing. It also makes it easier to be able to rule out technical issues when assessing your own performance, and be more readily able to blame the game itself for not completing your inputs properly. One other thing that's great for me from a general day-to-day functionality point of view is having just the open styler board. This makes it very easy to clean with some compressed air, and you don't end up with the usual hair dust and other nasty stuff stuck down there. And talking about the open board and like the board base itself, having that brushed metal look and feel to it is very, very nice. I really love that. And then we got a lot of the additional functions, and this contains things like being able to control your overclocking, MSI signature Mystic Light system via the board itself. And whilst those are really cool features for people who want to be able to do so if you're really into your overclocking or, you know, manually controlling your system performance, it's not something that you're likely going to be using on a day-to-day basis. The most important, and for me the most positive aspects for the board, are going to be its functionality, comfort, ergonomics and aesthetics. And let's be straight, all of those things are important. You might not feel that they are, but they very much are, because it's something that as gamers you're going to have right there in front of you, live with and spend a lot of time with it. Speaking to reliability and durability, obviously these are some things that I can't extensively know inside of only a month of use. I've not been having this keyboard for like a year or more. However, one of the reasons why I choose to work with MSI is because of the build quality. Whether it's the motherboards or the GPUs, I've always found them to be absolutely solid, and the same goes for this keyboard. I've been smacking the hell out of it for over a month and it's just taken it. Anybody who's heard me over TS will attribute to me being fairly heavy at typing, especially when I'm in a bad mood. And gaming keyboards need to take the hits when you're in those very high intensity situations and you're just smashing the commands out. So lastly, let's talk of course about the RGB. Now, you'll know by now, I'm pretty cynical about aesthetics over functionality. For me, it has to be the quality of the product first, and that comes to games as much as it does hardware for me. However, as with games, whilst I often dismiss aesthetics in preference to mechanical elements because functionality should always trump aesthetics, the exception is when everything else is just working. And I've said this about games before, that you can then appreciate the aesthetic fully and really get into that, because why wouldn't you at that point? Aesthetics are important, they're just not more important than functionality. Now, I've not owned an RGB board before because I never really felt the need, but because this board came with it, I was, you know, interested to have that and see how it was going to be. Honestly, it's just a nice thing. The internal workings of my PC itself are not heavily RGB'd up, but seeing my GPU and my cooler head glowing from time to time is always a cool little ambient thing. The GK80 has a variety of different RGB presets, and if you want to, you can go in and customize it to the nth degree, because of course it's got Mystic Light, which is MSI's signature thing, and it enables you to kind of do that across the entire PC, sync it all together. Some of the settings for the board as well are reactive, so as you press the keys they light up in different ways, but let's be real, these are kind of fun novelties. I also find the default rainbow unicorn mode to be a little bit much, but I have the board set by default on a much calmer kind of pulse color mode, so it basically cycles calmly through each color, just blending one into the next. It's actually strange because it seems fairly unimportant, but having my keyboard just kind of sitting there calmly pulsing colors whilst I'm editing stuff in the evening or even just watching a movie, just a nice piece of ambient lighting on the desk, and honestly I kind of really like it just for that. It's not something that you would put at the top of your list for purchasing a keyboard, obviously, but if I had the choice between an RGB and a non-RGB board in the future, prices change all the time, but I'd pay up for the RGB one, just having it sat on my desk for well over a month now. In conclusion, you're probably going to be able to tell I like this board. It's true, I like it very much. And it's true that this keyboard is genuinely something that I'm just loving and really happy with. Many years ago, I used to think that a keyboard was one of those peripherals that, apart from the switches, was very much just something that you could mix and match and not worry too much about as a, say, priority purchase for your setup. Having used the GK80 compared to not just boards that I own, but say other boards at gaming events that I've been, you know, there to use for testing and so on, when you compare it in a broad sense, you start to realize the difference when you find something that you really not just enjoy to use, but feel very natural and just easy to game with. Often when I go to gaming events, especially stuff for FPS, I'll actually take my own mouse because they often use, or, you know, have sponsored for the day, god-awful mice that are just too small or weird shape. And I remember going to a Battlefield event back in the day and multiple producers saying that they wish they'd had the foresight to actually bring their own mice as well. Well, the GK80 is probably one of those things that's going to be a part of that for me. If I go to an event which is going to have like an extensive period of testing over several days, I'd probably consider taking the GK80 with me. That's how much I enjoy it. And hopefully that'll be enough of a testament for you guys to understand how I've been getting on with this. So I'll just say thanks for watching this overview today, guys. All the links related are down below in the notes if you are curious about more information. But I also, as I always say with product reviews, I'm not a tech channel. If you're looking for more detailed information, go find some of the top ones on YouTube to check it out. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like. As always, helps me, helps the channel, and I'll see you next time.